The factors that give rise to our meeting today and all day tomorrow, it's an effort on the part of three universities, Columbia, Harvard, and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, to test whether the whole is greater than the sum of the parts in terms of Brazilian study. This is our first Lemann dialogue, a concept, a structure we came together 6 months or so ago in Cambridge to design. It's the first time we've done it. We hope it'll be the first of many more to come, that it will yield abundant fruit and intellectual exchange and practical policy suggestions as well. All of our cooperation, getting these three universities to cooperate, they've got off to a good start when all agreed that New York would be the best venue to start. I don't suspect that was only because Columbia is here, but via that as it may. And on that note, I want to add a special word of thanks to those who have traveled so far to be here this evening. International travel always sounds easier and more exciting than it actually is when you are in the airplane and navigating traffic in a strange city. And even coming from Boston involves some transtorno na vida das pessoas. So we're very grateful that all of you have made that effort. And of course, a warm welcome to those who hear from our New York City, Columbia University community as well. So hopefully the mix of people and ideas over the next 24 hours will make your effort very worthwhile. I think my colleagues Marilee Grindle and Mary Paula Ahrens-Kooning will echo my remarks. We're all very grateful, and we want to make this clear from the beginning to the incredible generosity of the Fundação Lemann, which is so ably represented here this evening by Dennis Misne, its Chief Executive Officer. I don't see Dennis right now. There he is over here on the right. Thank you to the foundation, Dennis. Express our gratitude. And beyond this, we are indebted to Jorge Paulo Lemann and to the Lemann family for their vision and their courage, I would say, in supporting the work of U.S. universities on Brazil, in the hope that a true partnership between our two countries would develop. Jorge Paulo himself is unable to be here, but wishes us well and is anxious to hear of the results of our deliberation. You'll be hearing more from me. It can be hard to avoid me as sort of the host this evening. You'll be hearing more from me about our goals and international cooperation and where we're going to have breakfast and lunch and meet and so forth and details like that. But right now, for more words of welcome and to emphasize the really tripartite organization and partnership that we hope is clear to all of you, I'd like to call my colleagues from Harvard and the University of Illinois to the podium for their introductory remarks. And we'll start with Marilee Grindle. Marilee, welcome. Marilee is the director of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard and of the Dr. classes, as they refer to it at Harvard, their Brazil Studies program. So welcome, Marilee.
Thank you, Tom. It is a real pleasure to be here this evening and to have an opportunity to welcome so many friends and colleagues and co-conspirators to focus great attention on Brazil, its past, its present, and its future. I am delighted to be some small part of that initiative, and I just wanted to say thank you to many of the people in the room who have helped make this possible. I'm a little concerned. As Tom has mentioned, we met several months ago. We sat around the table. We brainstormed, as academics often do. We thought beautiful thoughts. We thought magnificent thoughts. And then we all went back to our different universities. And lo and behold, while many of these beautiful ideas often die in the world we live in, this one, thanks to Tom and his colleagues here, has blossomed and been made to happen in a very wonderful way. And we're deeply grateful to you, Tom, for this. I am though concerned that you've set the bar so high that we're going to have a hard time when it comes to be our turn at Harvard to follow up with the second or third Lemann Dialogue. On behalf of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard University, then, welcome. Thank you, Tom Trebat. Thank you, Professor Francis Hagopian, who is the faculty chair of our Brazil Studies program that just keeps getting bigger and better all the time. Thank you to Jason Diet, who is up here from Brazil, where he heads our Brazil office. And thank you to Aaron Litvin, who makes everything happen both in Cambridge and in Brazil. We're deeply grateful. And thank you to our former colleague, John Coatsworth, who left us in such good conditions at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies that we have been able to continue along the path that he pioneered for us. So on behalf of us, a third of the group, I say welcome, and we're very much looking forward to the next day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilee. And now I'd like to call the podium for her words of introduction, Mary Paula Arenz-Kuning, the director of the Lemann Institute for Brazilian Studies at the University of Illinois. Welcome, Mary Paula.
Bem-vindo. It's wonderful to be here. I'm thrilled that we're doing this dialogue on education. I can't think of a more important topic for Brazil's future and present, and I think there's good news to report there too, so that's a good thing. I am a very new director, so I just started in the summer, and so I should thank my colleagues at Illinois. There's Professor Werner Baer, who we would not have an institute without him, and also there's Professor Joe Love. Where are you, Joe? Joe, who is the former director of the Institute, and also we wouldn't have an institute without you as well. So Werner and Joe were involved in organizing this dialogue from the beginning, and I come in at the end, and I get to stand up here and to take the credit, embody the Institute as it is. So I look forward to interacting with all of you and hashing out what is happening with Brazilian education and maybe setting a path for some interesting research that we can do in the future. So thank you very much.
We've all called attention to our colleagues who've been such instrumental parts of our Brazil studies and tonight's conference, and I want to join and echo that and thank Jorge Balan, visiting scholar at the School of International Public Affairs and a true expert in higher education, the co-conspirator with me here of the organization of the panel. Thank you, Jorge, for being with us. You'll be hearing Jorge tomorrow morning, and then someone you ought to meet and know. He's a very practical person, so you'll want to know him. I'll ask him to stand up. That's Esteban Andrade in the very back. He's our program manager for the Center for Brazilian Studies. And Esteban, you've received many emails, I'm sure, from him. Every time you didn't. He worried a lot about you, I'll assure you, every one of you. There was not a single one he wasn't worried about getting here on time and knowing where you should be. So, and he'll be doing that role over the next day and a half with some student volunteers that we have, and thanks to the students as well. Then my final task of the evening before we turn it over to our panelists is to introduce the very distinguished panels that we have in the emerging role of the universities in Brazilian development, and why that's a theme maybe that's been addressed in years past, but why it's especially relevant to address now. We have three, and I want to thank them. I realize how hard it is to get these three people together in one room without some minister or other intervening or some other program agenda taking precedence on their agendas, but they're here. And I want to introduce them. I'll start with the third person from my right. That's Professor Jorge Guimarães, who is the president of CAPES, the Ministry of Education in Brazil's main agency for the support and evaluation of graduate education, the key position in the Ministry of Education. Professor Guimarães, whose background is in biomedicine, has held numerous faculty positions at universities in Brazil and abroad. He's been president of CAPES since 2004, which is a remarkably long and successful tenure at that that very important and key institution. One of the things he'll be talking to us about tomorrow, or tonight, or tomorrow morning, will be Brazil's new plans to vastly expand the opportunities for Brazilians to study abroad, hopefully at Columbia, Harvard, and Illinois, among many other world universities. Professor Jorge Guimarães is tonight representing not only CAPES, but he's also the personal representative of Minister of Education, Fernando Haddad, who sends all a word of welcome and wishes us all good speed in our deliberations. So welcome, Professor Jorge Guimarães. Seated next to Professor Guimarães is Dr. Carlos Brito Cruz of FAPESP, the state research organization of the state of São Paulo. I dare say many states have research organizations, but FAPESP is one that I think others seek to emulate. Dr. Carlos Brito Cruz is a physicist and former rector of the great University of Unicamp in Campinas, where he's held a number of academic and administrative positions. He's a member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. I'm kind of summarizing from very distinguished resumes for him and for others. He's a member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. He's presently the scientific director at FAPESP, the research foundation of the state of São Paulo. He has just recently, you may have seen in the newspapers, and in the Brazilian studies community, organized a very highly regarded and successful FAPESP week in Washington. So he's very much involved in bringing together scholarly communities in the United States and Brazil and elsewhere. And finally, a friend, a colleague, Dr. Glauco Arbix, now the president of FINEP, which I introduced somewhat, taking some liberties. He may correct me on this. The president of FINEP, which is the public sector's bank, Brazil's Bank for Innovation. He's a professor of sociology for many years at the Universidade de São Paulo. He's also drawn to administrative tasks as well. He's been the former president of IPEA, the major research arm of the Brazilian Ministry of Planning, the Brazilian government's major think tank. As president of FINEP, Dr. Arbix Glauco deals extensively with private companies seeking to innovate, to close the gap in Brazil in science and technology, and works very closely, obviously, with universities as well. So he's a former visiting scholar at Columbia University, and we are very pleased, Glauco, to welcome you back to the Columbia campus, and thank you for joining this Mesa Redonda, the roundtable. And finally, we're so happy here at Columbia that Harvard has such a surfeit of talent that they could afford to allow us to have the benefit of John Coatsworth, who will be moderating this roundtable. John is a leading scholar of Latin American economic and international histories, fields in which he has taught and researched with great distinction at a number of U.S. universities, including Chicago, Harvard, and now Columbia. I think while he was at Chicago, he had a joint program with the University of Illinois, so he's familiar with all three of the universities tonight, very intimately familiar with them all. He has been a major force institutionally. I don't know how he has time for this. A major force institutionally in Latin American studies, having run or founded Latin American centers at all three of our partner institutions. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a recent former president of LASA, so he has labored in the vineyards of Latin American studies, and I think he's had a tougher job here merely in getting our Center for Brazilian Studies organized the way he wants it. So the benefit for us is we've been able to keep him, but that's been a fight because John, several months ago, was named by President Lee Bollinger of Columbia to be the provost of Columbia University for a period of time to be determined. So we've lent him in, but we're hoping very much to get him back into CEPA and into Latin American studies full time. But John, with that, and excuse me for taking more time than I should have, I turn it over to you and with a warm welcome to our panelists. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to find myself with so many wonderful colleagues from three institutions that really set the standard for work in Brazilian studies, Illinois, Harvard, and Columbia as a rising star, I would say. So I want to say thanks to everyone who's made this evening possible and this interesting program on development challenges in Brazil and the role of universities. There are two things, I think at least, two insights that have characterized the philanthropy of Jorge Paulo Lemann over the years as I have observed it. The first is that there's nothing so important to the future of human society than educating human beings. And the contributions that he's made at all levels, including primary education in Brazil, graduate education both in Brazil and the United States, and everything in between, has been truly extraordinary. His second insight, I think, is the product of his own experience, and it is that amazing things happen when you bring extraordinary people together. And so I want to say a special word of welcome to the Lemann Fellows who are here this evening from our 3 institutions. You are extraordinary people. You should get to know each other. You should create a network. You should help each other in the future, and you will all benefit from your relationships. I think that's part of what Jorge Paulo has in mind. This evening's panel, it's an honor actually to be sitting at the table with the 3 gentlemen that Tom Trebat has just introduced for some opening comments on the emerging role of universities in Brazilian development. So perhaps we'll just start with the distinguished gentleman to my left, Jorge Guimarães, who has, as Tom said, done extraordinary things as a leader in Brazilian higher education and now at CAPES.
Thank you very much, Professor Coatsworth. I thank you very much, Tom, for the invitation, and also the Illinois and Harvard universities and the Lemann Foundation. Tom said that we should start with some warming up for tomorrow, the 3 of us. And for that, he sent us some provocation concerning what we should say. And at the very beginning, he says that our expectation, his expectation, is that you could focus our discussion in 2 aspects: the university and its key role in the future of development of Brazil, on one hand, and the other hand, the Brazil-United States cooperation in academic field and the scientific field. Okay, for the first part, I would say that he made specific questions about that. And he is asking us, initially, are there any major changes in the current size, scope, and nature of doctoral education in Brazil that are required to adapt the graduate training system to the new global context? Okay, I said that this is partially can be considered. As in soccer, for instance, our football, quantity is important to reach equality. So the present ratio of doctorates to inhabitants in Brazil is very poor, 1.4. In other words, 1.4 doctorates, doctors or PhDs holders to 1,000 inhabitants. This is 6-fold less than Canada or Australian, and maybe 17-fold less than Sweden or Switzerland. So this is a big challenge for us. That's why we have been working so much, not only CAPES, but FAPESP, CNPq, FINEP, and several other state-oriented agents that were created, inspired in the FAPESP's work for several years. So even so, we are now granting about 12,000 doctorates per year. It will take us about 15 to 20 years to reach the level of Australia, for instance. So that's why we have to be working very much. Concerning the scope of this program, Brazil must be considered a fresh player in this very, let's say, old system of doing science. FAPESP was created in 1962, if I'm right.
Right.
Actually, was created a little bit before
47.
that. Yeah. And CNPq UNICAPS at 1951. In 1951, there was only 5 universities in Brazil. It means that UNICAMP, one of the best universities we have today, didn't exist at that time. It's younger than that. The USP, the University of São Paulo, was created in 1924, 300 years after Harvard, or Laval, that I just learned yesterday in Canada. So if you look to these numbers, you can figure that how far you are from being able to be this fresh player together with so old, experienced institutions throughout the world. Concerning the nature of our doctoral education system, we are now producing a lot of PhDs for our being so young in this system. But even so, it's very little as compared to what you need. Except for engineer, which is about 13% of the whole amount of graduate programs, which accounts for about 2,800 today. Except for that, there is a reasonable distribution among the several fields. But the production of these courses are very, very, very poor in terms of the quantity. Besides that, our science, it grew up as very similar to what we have here in the United States concerning the relative scientific production. For instance, 35% in natural science, 26% medical science, 32% biological science, engineer, only 5%, and social and behavioral science, 2%. That makes a lot of difference for other countries. He also asked, what is the current balance between disciplinary and problem-driving university research agendas in Brazil? Is there any pressure or real need to change this balance? And if so, in which direction? Well, what do you say? It's as far as today, engineer and other technological fields are the most required professions. As research is concerned, one can figure that the quality of Brazilian scientific production in engineering is quite good, being ahead of that of the BRICS countries, and not too far from the most developed ones, including the United States. I'm talking about quality. But quantity is a real problem. The lack of this workforce reflects the unbalanced proportion of students affecting both undergraduate and graduate programs. To correct this imbalance, a great effort must be done starting at the basic education level, increasing the qualification of students at secondary schools, especially mathematics and science. And he keeps asking, how permeable are universities and their research centers and institutes to the demands from the private sector, local and state governments, and no-governmental sectors in Brazil? Is there a need to improve communication between university research institutes and outside stakeholders? And if so, how? I would say that the old generation of Brazilian scientists were more conservative about this subject. In many fields, however, this is no longer the case with the new generation of researchers and university teachers. However, even being much open for such interaction, the communication between university research and outside stakeholders is quite difficult. This difficulty comes from both sides. The university inexperienced to cope with such demand and the industries that do not know as much what could be the importance of the university for their projects. Next question from Tom is, university research outputs have been growing consistently in recent years. Yet, there are often questions raised often about the quality and impact of the research enterprise in Brazil. What policies are required to raise the quality and impact of university research in Brazil? Does international collaboration play a role in this process? Since 1981, the scientific production in Brazil increased 16-fold, 5-fold faster than the rest of the world, reaching today about 36,000 international articles in 2010, and reaching the 13th position in the world ranking. In several fields, such as agriculture, tropical medicine, dentistry, entomology, veterinary medicine, biology, biodiversity conservation, and a few others, Brazil occupied higher position in the world ranking, from 2nd to 7th, representing between 5% and 18% of the world production, scientific production. About the quality, as impact factor is concerned, this is an indicator that presents a lot of bias, as many people know. But even so, the position of Brazil is 22nd among 13 countries that produced at least 1% of the world production. Because if you do not do this, you used to have a very small country that send the students to the United States and publish 2 papers with many citations, and the impact factor is 25, 80 or so. The highest impact is Sweden, which is 8.02. And Brazil is 43% of that. So it's not that much yet. Knowing also that most of these publications comes from the social science and human science, which are not cited as much in any place. So, besides this, Brazil is one of the lowest, one of the lowest index of cooperative publication with Brazilian scientists and foreign scientists, especially to the most developed countries. Thus, of course, as Tom asked, international cooperation can be an important element to improve this aspect of our scientific production. Again, like in soccer, quantity will push quality. It will be that that for a while, but increasing financing of most qualified projects, as FAPESP is doing, selecting more careful CNPq and the FAPESP and the FINEP, and also CAPES, selecting most qualified projects, and selecting proactive countries. That reminds us of his second question. What about the Brazil-United States cooperation? So I repeat that. Selecting proactive countries for cooperation, not so far is the case of the United States, will help to change this indicator. Okay, so I will stop here. There is 2 other questions, but I believe this is a very important point. We have several agreements with many countries, especially the European countries with CAPES. Very little here, formal agreements in the United States. What we have here is individual cooperation, and through that, the students, Brazilian students, can come for for a while for a full PhD or postdoc, or including undergraduate. For undergraduate, for instance, we had a very nice program, CAPS, FIPS, which is the last year this year, because of lack of interest from the American side. Interest means money. So this is something, it's, you know, you exchange 300 students, undergraduate students, from Brazil to here, and from here to Brazil. As a matter of fact, my wife has now 4 undergraduate students from Ohio State University. But that will be the end. So lacking formal agreement is something that's reaching very much the quality of the cooperation, of the scientific quality. And I can tell you about that. We have been supporting about 5,400, from 4,000 to 5,000 students per year. Only 25% is here in the United States. 75% is in European countries. Why that? Because you have many formal agreements. And this is not the case here. This program, new program called Science Without Borders, we expect to solve that, but we are very much disappointed. It generates a lot of interest in American universities in the whole world. And inside Brazil, the students are very much excited about that. However, every university we talk about this, say, how many places we intend to give? 10, 15. So it will be difficult for us to put 100,000 students outside Brazil. And we started here to the United States because we know that this formal agreement would be important. And we had at CAPES 8,000 applicants, undergraduate students, only for the United States. And almost half of them has passed the minimal requirement, which is the TOEFL examination. Even so, using the IIE, which is our partner for a long time, it will be not possible to put more than 2,000 at this moment, in January. So I think this is very important to discuss here. It's how come we can change that? And I feel a little bit upset about this disappointment, because we saw that we intend to put from this 100,000, maybe 30,000 in the United States in 4 years. It means that we should have about 8,000 per year. Impossible. I don't think it will be possible. However, China has 120,000 every year. What's different? I let the answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In American political parlance, this is called an unfunded mandate. As the Congress or the President signs something and says everybody will do something, and then no one appropriates the funds to get it done. So, my goodness. Carlos Brito.
Can I stand? Good evening, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this very interesting and I'm sure productive discussion. I'll organize my remarks in 2 blocks. First one in which I would like to point out that we are supposed to talk here about the emergence of universities for Brazilian development, but I want to point out that they are not really emerging. Brazil could not have become the 88th economy in the world in a country with 200 million people without having some kind of a university system that makes industry and agriculture in the country move. So it's not really emerging. It's continuing, and it might be more visible today than it was before for many reasons. So that will be my first block of comments. And then in the second block, I will talk about what I believe are 2 of the most important challenges for higher education and especially for research universities in Brazil. So as for the emergence, I just want to point out some cases. As I mentioned before, being the eighth economy in the world requires some knowledge. Maybe we do not have any Nobel Prizes, but somebody has to figure out how to make the cars and the planes and the government work and so on. But for example, Brazil has a very relevant aircraft industry, and that is a direct result of higher education in Brazil. That's a very interesting case. Back in 1947, when the Brazilian government decided that Brazil should have an aircraft industry, their decision was very peculiar. Instead of deciding to invite some foreign company to come to Brazil, they decided, okay, to make aircraft, we need to have people who know how to make aircraft. So let's organize an engineering school to educate people who will be able to design and build aircraft. They created this engineering school, which is the Instituto Tecnológico de Aeronáutica, Aeronautics Technology Institute. Actually, they came to the US and had essential support from MIT. The first two rectors of ITA were faculty from MIT. They organized this school, and then the first batch of engineers graduated in 1951, and after 16 years, there were enough engineers to create Embraer, which is today the third largest aircraft manufacturer in the world. So that's an example of universities and development. And it's not new, it's not today, it's something that happened in the 50s, in the 60s. I could also talk about the agribusiness thing in Brazil. Brazil became the one of the main producers of food for the world because of engineers, agronomists, chemists, biologists who were educated at the University of São Paulo, University of Viçosa, University of Campinas, University of Rio de Janeiro, several universities. And the third and last example that I want to bring here is that of energy. Brazil has today a situation which is completely peculiar in terms of energy. In Brazil, about half, it's 48%, of the energy comes from renewable sources. You will not find any developed country which has this percentage higher than 11%. So 48% is something that most countries in the world would like to have, but could not yet. How did Brazil do that? Brazil created this biofuels program back in 1975, and Brazilian engineers and scientists, both in academia and industry, made this a successful enterprise to the point that today, last year in Brazil, 18% of all the energy generated in Brazil came from sugarcane, which is a type of energy that you plant this year, you harvest next year, then you plant again, and you repeat that ad infinitum. So that's, again, a result that was obtained in Brazil because of having a university system. So really, universities in Brazil have brought a sizable contribution to the development of Brazil in many other fields. And I think that today, universities in Brazil are positioned to bring a stronger contribution, and that's what I think justifies the idea of the emergence, because it's becoming more visible. Because there was a sequence of events in Brazil that changed Brazil's life. To put it shortly and simply, I think it is democracy since 1985. That was essential. Many people forget about this because they tend to associate what is happening in Brazil today with things that happened last month, but it's not. Democracy was essential for that. Then there was the stabilization of Brazilian economy in 1994, also essential. You cannot do anything meaningful in a country which has inflation at 1,000% per semester. The third event were some very important institutional reforms which happened in Brazil from 1995 to 2003, which changed the way the country worked, the public system worked, and the way the country planified its future. And then economic growth, which started to happen in maybe a sustainable way. You have to watch that for a number of years before being able to say that, which started in 2005, 2006. And that, of course, created the opportunity for inclusion, for increase in wealth, for more international visibility, and so on. So this chain of events was essential for what is happening in Brazil today. So that's my comment about the role of universities for development in Brazil. There are many details to that. We might be able to discuss those in the tomorrow. So the second part, as for the challenges, I want to mention two of them. There are many challenges, but I think that the two that I'm going to mention are among the most important ones. Curiously, the first one is a challenge that affects higher education, but it's not really related or in higher education. The thing is that when you put together a lot of university presidents and you ask them what's the main problem, they always try to find problems that will bring money to them. But many times the problems they have, the main problem is not the one that is going to bring money to them. It's somewhere else. And I believe that the main problem for higher education in Brazil today is high school education. That is what is really limiting and restricting the development of higher education in Brazil. So many people in Brazil do things about higher education. The government creates new universities and ideas about we need to have a university here, more inclusion there, this and that, but it doesn't change the landscape. The thing is that the way things are today in Brazil, almost or all persons, I cannot say kids because in Brazil many people are older than being kids by the time they finish high school. All persons who finish high school can find a place in some university. There are actually more places than people finishing high school. That doesn't include the fact that the quality of high school education is terrible. Less than 5% of the persons who complete higher education obtain a grade in the exams, national exams, that would be considered satisfactory. Less than 5%. And the number of persons concluding high school education in Brazil has been constant since the year 2000. For 11 years now, we have been graduating 1,800,000 people out of high school education in Brazil. And that would be, if you count in relation to the population with age between 15 and 17, that would be close to 30% of those. It means that 70% of the kids don't have a chance. And it's impossible to make a country without using the intelligence of all the kids that you have. So that's the main restriction for higher education in Brazil. This restriction is appearing. It is making an effect which is measurable. For example, the number of persons who completed higher education in Brazil grew at a rate which was 13% per year from 1995 to 2005. Every year, 13% more. From 2005 to 2010, this rate fell to 3% per year. So actually there was a rising curve of university graduates, and then, boom, it slowed down, 3%. That's talking about higher education. If we talk about university education, which is an important part, but it's not all of higher education, if we talk about university education, the rate from 1995 to 2005 was 11% per year more. From 2005 to 2010, it was 0.1%. So actually, since 2005, Brazil does not increase the number of persons who complete university education. If we look at the public system of universities, the rate of growth was 8% per year from 1995 to 2005. From 2005 to 2010, the rate has been minus 2%. So this is a problem, right? It's not something that we can look to the other side and say, well, something good is going to happen. It's not. It's impossible to operate a country with an economy that wants to grow at 3, 4, or 5% per year without having a growing number of university graduates in order to do that, especially when the economy is growing, because then the competition for persons becomes much more fierce and hard. So this is happening because of the stagnation in high school education, because there are not enough good students from high school to accept even in the good universities in Brazil. If you look at the graduate studies, the rate of growth in the graduation of doctors in Brazil, doctoral level, was 15% per year from 1995 to 2004. Every year, 15% more. After 2004, it fell to 5% per year. Again, it's a break which is on because of the lack of persons coming from undergraduate completion and lack of persons concluding high school. So this is a very, very relevant, very important difficulty for Brazil today. The second challenge that I want to mention is the challenge of, I see I'm creating some debate already here. That's the idea, right? The second point that I want to bring out here, and the last challenge, is that, do I have 2 minutes yet?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Is that of quality and impact. Even though science in Brazil has grown at a strong rate, Professor Guimarães mentioned that, it's an important result for Brazil, we need to focus in increasing the quality of that science, in having more either intellectual, economic, or social impact with the science that is created in the country. And in order to do that, of course, more collaboration, I would say. It's not only international collaboration, it's collaboration, because you would need to collaborate with industry, with government, and with organizations abroad in order to increase impact and have more interesting problems and challenging problems and so on. And of course, at the São Paulo Research Foundation, we are working on this, especially since 2005, with a number of agreements with several funding agencies, universities, and industry outside Brazil. I completely agree with my colleague, Jorge Guimarães, when he says that for some reason it's much easier to enter into agreements for scientific collaboration with organizations in Europe than it is here in the United States. Actually, the organizations in Europe, they flock to Brazil. They come to us and present opportunities and so on. So that, to give you concrete examples, FAPESP has an agreement with all the 7 research councils in the UK. That's the first time they ever entered into such an agreement with any organization outside the UK, through which a scientist in São Paulo and a colleague of his in the UK can write a single research proposal, submit it to one of the research councils, and FAPESP and the research council will have a unique, a single track of evaluation. It's not a two-track. It's one track. We choose reviewers together with them. We send somebody to participate in their panel meeting in the end to make the decision. If it's approved, FAPESP will fund the budget, which will be used by the PI in São Paulo, and the Research Council will fund the PI in the UK. We have already a good number of those proposals going on. We have the same kind of agreement with DFG in Germany, with ANR in France. To feed those agreements, we enter into agreements with universities for smaller funding so that researchers can get together and, in a period of, say, 10 or 12 months, organize a proposal. We have those with maybe 12 universities in the UK, several in France. We still do not have anyone in the US. We have universities in Canada, we have in Argentina, many places. So it's just to reinforce the fact that it's, for some reason, it seems to be harder to get this moving with the US. We are very much intent on that, and we now were able to enter into the first agreement with the National Science Foundation. It's a result of this event that we organized a few weeks ago, which is an agreement for collaboration in biodiversity-related research. We will have the first call for proposals out in January. And we are working in other of those agreements. So, emergence of universities. Universities have already been important in Brazil for a long time. They are more visible now. Challenges: high school education, quality, and impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hesitate to predict that you'll hear more from American researchers and institutions, but from what we're hearing from Washington about cuts in the budgets for scientific research, every scientist I run into, I'm going to point in your direction. Garco.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank Professor Goldsworth, Professor Tom Trebot, Professor Mary. Thank you for the invitation. And I'd like to thank as well Harvard University, Illinois University, and Columbia University, and so Lemann's Foundation as well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to present briefly 3 ideas and just one proposal. The first idea is the Brazilian economy is growing again since 2004. But there is a new quality of the Brazilian economic growth, a quality which is different from the past and different from the BRIC countries, from the advanced countries, and the majority of the countries in the world. I mean, the Brazilian growth is reducing poverty and at the same time is reducing inequality, social inequality, gender inequality, racial inequality, regional inequality, inequality in labor market. And I think that for me as a sociologist, that is a major point that nobody can forget. That's as you know, Brazil still is a very unequal country, but the success in recent years must be emphasized. And it is a real point of departure for a new thinking about Brazil. At the same time that we are reducing poverty and inequality, the Brazilian government is playing a more active role in promoting innovation and technology, a role totally different from the past, from the developmentalist period and even from the 90s and even in the beginning of the 2000s. I call this in my papers, in my articles, there is in Brazil a new inclusionary state activism, which is different from the past. Although I recognize that there are some people that think that would be good to go back to the past. I don't think that we can, and thank God, I think that the government doesn't want. My point is, to finish my first remark, is there are new efforts to overcome our previous science and technology policies by fostering innovation and transforming innovation in a kind of a new engine of growth. Second idea, Brazil needs a more innovation-friendly economy to incentivize, to stimulate investment in R&D and technology inside companies. Brazilian companies invest too little, poorly in technology and in innovation. And just to give you an idea, our researchers, the majority of our researchers, they work at the Brazilian universities and not inside companies, you know. And no way we won't get a very good place in the world if we are unable to face that kind of challenge. That means there is a lack of human resources, and more than that, there is a lack of human resources inside companies in order to make them innovate. The third idea is, although we have big challenges ahead, I'm very optimistic about my country. Let me say, cautiously optimistic, okay? And I think that for the first time, Brazil can aspire to be a global power in energy, in food supply, and at the same time in environment, I mean sustainable development. Pre-salt oil offers to Brazil new opportunities, a new window of opportunity, and I think that we have to deal, universities have to deal with that kind of new reality. You know, just to remind you, oil is a commodity, but drilling and extracting oil in deep sea water has nothing to do with a commodity. Drilling in deep sea offshore oil has to do with high performance physics, biotech, nanotechnology, seismology, you know, new materials. I mean, everything that a real civilized country needs to have. And I think that we are facing a point in time very similar to the one that the US faced in the 50s. I mean, you had the Apollo program. You intend to put, and you succeed in putting a man in the moon. The difference, I guess, is our moon is not in space, but it's underneath the sea, you know. And that's, I stress that point because we won't restructure and remodernize our universities without, you know, a motto, you know, without a goal, a clear goal to change our curricula, to change our research agenda everywhere, in every university, in every department, in every lab in Brazil. And I think that pre-salt could put us in the frontier of knowledge. It's impossible to think of engineering nowadays and physics and new materials without thinking of pre-salt. The challenge is huge, it's enormous. And I think that we can do more and better. My My proposal is a single one, is just to think of how to improve cooperation between Brazil and the US. I would say I'd like to propose to create a new network linking Brazilian researchers with American researchers. Linking researchers work in both countries, in public and in private sectors. I think that would be or could be very useful for us to put them together. Not just to get to know each other, you know, but not just to interchange ideas, but to produce a new space, a new environment of cooperation. And there are thousands of Brazilians teaching and working inside private companies in the US, and I think that there are thousands of Americans working and teaching there in Brazil. But they are fragmented, and I think that would be good for the Brazilian universities and for American universities if we have a new network to put them together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my job is to see if I can't get these three very distinguished visitors to squabbling among themselves. And the first point, I think, that I noticed some grumbling on the panel was when Carlos began citing figures on the stagnation in enrollments in higher education. So perhaps, Jorge, I can ask you if you have something to comment on.
Well, a lot of comments. Because statistics is good for many things, isn't it? Wow. Serves a lot of things, huh? I don't know where Brito took some of these statistics, but anyway, concerning the graduating program, it's completely wrong. So, 5% a year, is that it? You think so on new PhDs?
It is the number.
It's well, yeah. Okay, so that's my comment.
Supported by others.
Can I?
Here, someplace.
Can I? Yeah.
Carlos.
I will comment on that. Yeah, Viotti is one that can help us here. Yeah, the thing is that the data that I use is data published by the government. For example, the Ministry of Education publishes every year something which is called the Sinopse da Educação Superior. It's an annuary of data. And I have the patience to open the computer and look at the numbers. It is there. And the thing is that what you obtain when you look at the numbers are figures like that.
Yeah,
Right? The things that go up and then stop growing. And so it's a matter of looking at the data and fitting the data with growth or non-growth parameters. It's public data. And actually in the book that Viotti published, there is one figure which allows us to see that. Viotti will remember that. In one figure, he compared the number of doctoral graduates in Brazil with the number in the US. Remember that figure? Yeah. And that's a figure in which back in 1980, Brazil graduated 2% of the number of doctorates that graduated in the US. Then this is a figure that goes up, goes up, goes up, and then what happens at some point? It flattens out. It flattens out.
Professor Viotti.
Yeah. Brazil is lowered down and the US increased, both things. But that's a way to see that. I'm not inventing the numbers.
for 5%.
It's 5.5%, George. It depends on what.
12%.
It's not. It's not. It's not 12%. No way. It's not.
So the Lemann Fellows here this evening, your homework assignment is to go to your computers,
Check the
access the
data.
government data and any other data you can find, and we'll have a vote tomorrow on who's right on whether it's 5% or 12. So the floor is open for comments, questions, discussions, issues about facts, or anything else? Yes.
I'm curious as to what you mean comparative literacy figures for China and Brazil, and how this compares to, because I know you mentioned the 120,000 Chinese students in the U.S. I'm just wondering what the comparative literacy figures are, if you know, and how this impacts perhaps the exchanges.
So the question is the comparative, do you know anything about the comparative literacy figures of Brazil, China, and perhaps the other two BRICS? Brazil is at an advantage over the other BRIC countries, I would think.
I don't have the right number, but I would say China has also we are high on illiteracy for sure, especially at the age of above 15. But I don't think it's too much different from China at this moment, though they are doing very good work on basic education, which we're just starting. This Brito forgot that, but for tens of years, Brazil put out behind the basic education. So it's something that we are paying now for this problem.
Yeah. Other questions? Tom? Oh, sorry. You first.
My question is that both you have mentioned that we have a lot of difficulties to make institutional agreements with the U.S. institutions. According to Europeans, what's the main reason for the difference of attitude of the American institutions compared with European institutions?
Maybe it's because you have our students that we want without make some other. And secondly, it's because you forgot that Brazil could be a good partner. Brazil has democracy, as Brito said. Brazil is very friendly. My generation most people were formed here for full PhD or so, some kind of training here. And this is very friendly. And we do not put money in war, for instance, at all. You should put more money on science and education than in war, as Americans are doing. So things that are different from Brazil. But I think there is, in the case of the European countries, because they do not have as much young people, it's many elementary school being closed in many cities because there is no kids. So they invented this kind of Bologna's process, which is very bad. It's so-called 3+2+3 for a whole program, master, undergraduate, master, and PhD in 8 years. It's impossible. In this century, which so many innovations being discovered every day. So they made that just for attracting students from Latin America, from Africa, and from Asia. And of course, they have no experience, for instance, in master's program as much. I guess after the United States, the best experience in master is Brazil. We have 120,000 students doing master's program, besides the initiation science, which is also something that helps a lot. It's a Brazilian invention. So besides that, most countries, European countries, they have some kind of interest in Brazil. For instance, German, the biggest industrial city, German city in the world is in São Paulo, for instance. So also the French people, most recently Spain, Portugal, and now Sweden and Switzerland. Okay, so a lot of economical interest in Brazil. That's why they are more open. One project that we have for German is CAPS and DFG in German. It includes 12 Brazilian universities, 10 German universities, several Fraunhofer institutes, and it's only for manufacturing engineer. So it's very focused. We cannot do something like this here. They might be interested, but so far it has been difficult.
I once found myself in the office of the deputy director in charge of international relations of the Chinese Institute of Science and Technology, in charge of scientific research throughout the country, who, in perfect English with a slight New York accent, actually, described how he had a wonderful experience as a doctoral student at the City University of New York, but that he still had difficulty in his job because his director was constantly pressuring him to sign more agreements with the United States. And he said, I can't explain to him that in the United States is a country of chaotic individualism. You can't sign agreements. There's nobody to sign agreements with. Everybody's on his own. And so what they're thinking of is the model of the European country. You know, the prime minister arrives, he walks off the plane, behind him comes the minister of education. They come in, they sign an agreement, send 200 scientists next year. The next year, 200 scientists show up. There's nobody in the United States that can go to Brazil and commit 200 scientists to do anything. So it's we have an 18th century notion of how you run the government and science and everything else, and so it makes it difficult to deal with a scientist.
I would add to that the fact that it seems to me that in Europe, the way they organized their science system for the last 20, 25 years was a way which is strongly based in collaboration. Anyone who ever tried to work one of those European Union research proposals knows that they always request that you must have people from 3 countries, and there are papers about how much is the overhead cost for having this kind of project and so on. But anyway, they developed a culture of collaboration. So they are, and yeah, and that's something that is one of the factors. But I think we should also remember that before Brazil started to graduate doctoral students in Brazil, most of the faculty in Brazil obtained their doctorates here in the United States. So that most of the networks for the last generation of Brazilians who did their graduate studies outside of Brazil are here in this country. They are not in Europe by a large margin. So this is something that can be explored in this kind of opportunity. And I should also mention that at FAPESP, in our experience, we found very good receptivity in American companies for entering into agreements. We have a very nice and important agreement between FAPESP and Microsoft Research for research that is done in São Paulo by researchers in São Paulo, co-funded by FAPESP and Microsoft Research. We have a nice agreement with Agilent. We just signed a very important agreement with Boeing for establishing in São Paulo a center for research in biofuels for aviation. So there are many, many opportunities. And the thing I wanted to mention when you said about the funding, the one thing that the directors from the Research Councils UK told me was that many faculty in the UK are starting to find out that their chances of having a proposal approved in any of the research councils increases if they add capable scientists from São Paulo and reduce the budget they are requesting to the Research Council, because they have a team which is more qualified at a lower cost for the Research Council. That's a good deal.
It certainly is. So I think I want to thank all 3 of our panelists this evening, Jorge Guimarães, Carlos Brito Cruz, and Glauco Arvis, for getting this conference off to a terrific start.